We are so glad that you're here. If you have worked for an amazing leader, you probably know it. You can picture their face right now. If you've worked for less than extraordinary leader, you can probably picture their face too. We all know where those people have fallen in those categories. And I'm so passionate about this. Leadership is so important because you bring it home with you, whether you're being led by a good leader or a bad one, you're bringing it home to your family. So we're going to introduce you right now to Charley Swords. She is the author of Dare to be a Revolutionary Leader. Charley, welcome.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. I'm delighted to be here and thank you for having me.
Well, we have a lot to cover today. Let's talk about, first of all, the overall, not just meaning of your book, but the importance of great leadership and what your book is about.
Thank you. Well, my book, Dare to be a Revolutionary Leader, is a fresh perspective on leadership as we know it today. And leadership is still a very complex and poorly understood phenomena, and I think it will continue to be so. We're probably all very familiar with the traditional leadership models. And in my work over the years, I realized that the traditional leadership models that got us to where we are today, they're not the leadership models to take us forward or to take us out of this crisis. And in my work also, I've noticed that leaders tend to focus on the business results and the processes. And for me, the people are too far down the pecking order. For all leaders, they achieve their results through their people. And so
Yes.
I believe leaders need to put the people back up front and center. And that is why I wrote the book as I wrote it. So really it's about, as the subtitle says, people are the solution. They're not something you think about later in the strategy.
The greatest assets that you have. Charley, you and I could speak all afternoon on this. This is how passionate I am about this. But let's talk about your credibility. Let's talk about your career. What's brought you to this point?
Well, over 40 years ago, I worked in the financial services sector and I worked up to, some of the management levels. But the higher I went, the more disillusioned I got, actually, because I felt people were less and less, not important, but valued. And I think there's a difference between those two words. And it comes back to what I have in the book. I talk in the book about your core values, the essence of the individual. And what I realized at the time was my core values were not aligned with the practices of the institution. And therefore I had a decision to make, and it was, do I stay or do I go? And I chose to leave and to be true to myself. And that is the essence of this book. So it's my encouragement for all readers to go back in and to find themselves and to be true to their essence. So when I left the bank, I left it 24 years ago. And since then, I have traveled the world. I've worked in 26 countries. I've worked in many cultures, many organizations. And I have worked with individuals at all levels, up to and including boards of directors, C-suite, the senior executives, the leadership team. And the one thing I found, Suzanne, was no matter what country I was in, no matter what culture, the real issues of leadership were exactly the same. So it really didn't matter where I worked.
And what were some of those issues? Just maybe the top three that were just glaringly
The
common.
three, and they're still common actually, is, in strategy development, and I've done a lot of that, the focus is the bottom line first. And then it's how do we achieve it? And then we look at process re-engineering, and we look at technology and state of the art, everything, and digitalization. And the people are way down the pecking order. And regardless of all of those support elements, the people are the ones who are facing the customers. And it is through the people you actually achieve your results. So I believe the starting point has to be there. In other examples, then, when I have worked with various departments and units and managers, in terms of let's develop a more comprehensive and a more inclusive and a more effective process, product development comes to mind. And, I got everybody from all the different departments into a room. And I said, now let's discuss it together. But prior to this, nobody got together. Everybody looked at it in their silo, in their office, whenever it suited them, not when it suited the organization collectively, certainly not when there was a customer at the end of the process. So nobody saw the customer, they just saw their little bit. I've also worked in the medical sector, and what I've really noticed there is it's quite sad, but it's that a lot of the leaders are there, certainly at the junior and the middle levels, by default. They didn't necessarily choose to be there. They're trained nurses, but yet they have to suddenly start and understand what strategy is, and look at reducing your budget and manage your time and manage your people. And they're going, I have no idea what to do. I could work forever in the theater, but I'm not good at this management stuff.
Right.
So they thought there was a thing that they needed to learn, something to learn to be a good manager. Whereas I said, no, you need to learn to understand yourself and your abilities and understand how you lead your people. And the big message I give everybody is you cannot manage people. You might manage situations that arise from their behavior or whatever, but you lead people and you manage the systems and the solutions, etc. So that's something that I really try and emphasize. You lead people. No adult, I think, the world over likes to be told what to do by another adult.
And Charley, I'm just going to jump in real quick and say the way things are going with the pandemic and, medically wise, and with people having a harder time getting them back to work, your message is more important and relevant than it ever has been in our lifetime.
Completely. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, to be honest with you, the genie has been let out of the bottle to a large extent, particularly in large organizations. And I've worked with some overseas in terms of, wow, how do we manage all of our people who are now working from home? And how do we, what are the issues? So you have two kind of issues. From a corporate point of view, they're looking at, they're not talking to each other, they're not engaging. I don't know, are they doing the work properly, etc., etc.
Sure. And accountability.
It's a controlling mindset. How do I control them? I can't see them or feel them or be in their space. From the individual's point of view, there's quite a mix. Some are feeling completely isolated and cut off from the organization and their team members, and they're suffering those withdrawal symptoms. Some are not suited to working alone. Some are blossoming, working from their own perspective and their own workspace. They're overproductive, and the mere thought of going back into an office and being controlled is absolutely, it's murdering them. So for a leader now, I do believe the leadership challenge is significant the world over, because the teams are hybrid. The expectations are very, very different. The dynamics and the diversity is huge. And the leaders have got to really have to step up and become far more agile, far more flexible, but more importantly, I believe, far more empathetic than they have been to date. Well, I think you have to look at them as human beings, not as a means to an end. They're not just a staff number. They're not somebody to be used and placed as and wherever you see fit from a business perspective. I know all of that is important, but I think you get far more out of people if you look at them as human beings. We know the employee engagement levels are dreadful, and they have become worse since the pandemic. If your people are not engaged, they're not productive, they're not working to capacity. And to be very honest with you, I think a leader has a pretty tough time at the moment. They really need all of their people to really come together. And a lot of them have done, don't get me wrong, but there are some who think, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So we have the Great Resignation. It's happening everywhere. And that has to be the headache of a lifetime for
Charley, I'm so sorry to cut you off. We're down to just the final few seconds. You are represented by Book Trail Agency. How can people get a hold of your book?
They'll find my book on Amazon.com. They'll also find a book page on my own website, charleyswords.com. And, also Barnes & Noble and any good bookshop.
Very good. Charley, thank you so much. Have a great day. I hope to talk again.
Thank you, Suzanne. It was a pleasure. Thank you.